And welcome into Real Deal Sports Talk with KP. It is June 16th, 2019. It is Father's Day weekend. The NBA Finals have wrapped up. The NHL Finals have wrapped up. OTAs have wrapped up. And we're stuck with nothing but baseball. So if you're baseball lovers, go enjoy a game today. Go get your Cracker Jacks. Go get your peanuts. Go have a beer. Enjoy baseball today on Father's Day. If you're not baseball, maybe Women's World Cup action. Maybe some other soccer action going on out there as far as sports today for you to watch. Big story out there right now. Obviously, we'll hit it first before we get to the top 5 and bottom 5 Dlines in the NFL as I see them. I'll break down how I ranked them and how I came to my conclusion, because it's as obsolete as anybody else's list. And even putting mine together when I got to the finish, when I got to the final product, I could see how obsolete this list was, but we'll do it anyway. We're going to do it for each and every position group going into camp, as these are the pre-camp, preseason rankings, obviously, as we don't know who the final players on every team will be. We also had a couple brand new champions who were crowned this week, so we'll talk a little bit about those two. And then we had the passing of one of the greatest owners in the history of the NFL this week that we'll get to at the end of the show. But before we get there, let's go ahead and we'll get to this blockbuster trade, this trade that could have happened months ago, this trade that could have helped so many people stay out of their feelings. And it's basically the same trade, the same group of people. In fact, they're getting less players in the trade. They're getting less picks in the trade than what was offered to them during the season, the Pelicans are, from the Lakers. The Lakers came out that the Lakers were the odds-on favorite to win next year's NBA title just the day before this trade went down, which is a little suspect, almost like somebody in Vegas knew what was going down and what was going to happen. Another story, another day. But here we are. The Lakers have now paired Anthony Davis with LeBron James. They trade Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, and 3 first-round picks, including this year's number 4 overall pick in those 3, to the New Orleans Pelicans for Anthony Davis. So the Pelicans get a haul back. And I had a friend recently ask me, do I think this is too much for Anthony Davis? First off, let me go back to what I was saying when I opened this topic. This could have happened months ago. This is almost the same package. It makes absolutely no sense why the Pelicans would have waited until now unless they really thought they were going to get something else. The proposed package that came from the Celtics, who are one of the teams vying for this Anthony Davis trade, was a joke compared to anything that's been rumored that the Lakers have been offering going back to before the trade deadline. This changes the whole scope of the second half of the season if you just make this deal back in February or March. So for it to come around now, it's annoying. It's like, what were you doing? Why were you playing with everybody? You were playing with Anthony Davis. You're playing with the Celtics. The Celtics were playing with you. You messed up the Lakers. The team chemistry, the young players showed that they don't have grit right now. They don't understand the business side. They just all want to be buddies and play ball, which is great, except for when you play professional sports. Now the business side is automatically into it. I've said it numerous times before. Even if I had had the chance to make it to the NFL and my preferred sport, I don't know that I would have enjoyed myself because I didn't want it to be a job. I loved playing. I loved going out and competing. I did not want it to be everything that I was, all encompassing, my business, my life, and my fun. And that's what it becomes at that level. The young players on the Lakers showed they couldn't do that. Now, to the question of, did they give too much? Well, Josh Hart, he's going to be a splash guy here and there for his career. He's going to come off the bench. He'll probably have a nice 5 to 10 year career. He'll have some games where he'll hit 30 points. He might even have a 40-point game or two the way scoring goes in the NBA right now during his career. But that's who Josh Hart is. He's not a blossoming young player who's going to turn into an all-pro and be all NBA and this and that. He's going to be a nice, solid team guy coming off the bench. That's what he's going to be for the Pelicans. Lonzo Ball, we really don't know. He has the potential. He looks like he has the glimpses. He looks like he has the skill set to be a really good point guard, really good defensively, maybe not a top scorer. Same with Brandon Ingram. We've seen a lot of glimpses offensively of this guy. He has the length to be a nice on-ball defender, coming around screens, even playing that game, but not consistent. I don't know that either one of those two players have the drive to be great. They know they're good, but do they have the drive to be great? That's what we need to see. Now they're being forced and put into a position where it's like, okay, now it's your team. You're not in LeBron's shadow. You're not in Magic's shadow. You're not in LA's shadow. You've been traded. Somebody did not want you, did not value you as much as they valued someone else. So are you going to buck up? Are you going to do something with this Pelicans team? Are you going to make a name for yourself? Or are you going to cower and just kind of collect your check and go through the process and, play a little ball and have some fun and get some endorsements? Because, you look at this potential Pelicans team: Lonzo Ball, Drew Holiday, Brandon Ingram, Okafor, and possibly Zion. That's a nice young squad. You could win some games there. You've got 3 former Duke players. They've been taught the right way by Coach Krzyzewski. They have that lifeline to reach out to. Drew Holiday's a solid NBA point guard, not an all-pro, but a solid NBA point guard. Could be a 2 guard with Lonzo Ball running the point. You start building some pieces around there. Maybe you get something going there with the Pelicans. Now, all that has to fall in place. No other trades can take place. Ball has to show up. Ingram has to live to his potential. Okafor has to continue to develop into at least an average NFL player. And Zion has to hit, not get hurt, and be the world beater when he joins the NBA. Now, LA, they need money. After this deal, they only have $23.7 million available in cap space, which is not a lot. It's not enough to sign another max guy. So they either need Anthony Davis to waive his $4 million option in a trade, and or try and get the Pelicans to wait until July 30th to complete the trade so that they don't have to pay that $4 million, increasing their amount of cap, increasing their ability to sign another max player. Now, they've got a team to build, max player or not. They kept Kuz. That's huge. I did not want Kuz in this deal originally. He's not now. That's great. They kept him. So you've got 3 good players there. Kuz is a young guy. He blended so well with LeBron until all of this contract trade nonsense went down. So keep that going. Now he feels like he's part of the team. He's the inside circle. Anthony Davis is going to come in and do what he does. He's going to give you 25-10. Can you get a Kemba? Can you get a Kyrie? Can you get somebody else? Chris Paul wants out of Houston. We know his relationship with LeBron. Could he be a piece that does just enough for a Lakers team? I've joked before about, them getting Carmelo and Chris Paul and all these guys together now in the offseason and them being Lakers as the Banana Boat crew. But the offseason has now begun. The first chess piece has been made. We expect a lot of deals, a lot of players to change teams this offseason. It has now begun shortly after the NBA Finals have finished up. The NBA Finals that saw the Toronto Raptors win their first ever title. Basketball invented by a Canadian. First NBA game ever in Toronto. It comes full circle, and the Raptors win the title 4-2 over Golden State, over the dynasty, ending the dynasty. You all know it. I called it. I said Kawhi was on a revenge mission. This has been 2 years in the making, since Zaza tripped him up, since the Spurs had the 30-point lead and Kawhi went down and everything fell apart in San Antonio. Kawhi has quietly been plotting for this moment, hoping that he would match up for more NBA title chances against the team that knocked him out. Whether that was his main focus or not, because he's never going to admit it was, winning the title was, whether it was Golden State, whether it was the Nuggets, whoever the opponent was, that was his goal. But it makes it a little bit sweeter knowing that this has now come full circle for him. He's become the first player to win the Finals MVP in the East and the West. He joins Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and LeBron James as the only players to win the Finals MVP for two different teams. Now, a couple years ago when he was with the Spurs, before this all started, I was and everybody else was talking about how Kawhi was becoming the best player in the NBA. His offensive game coupled with his defensive ability and was unmatched at the time. Now we see it come back. We see this new system where it's like we're going to rest Kawhi. He's going to turn it on. He's going to ramp it up. He's going to become playoff Kawhi. It's a system that worked for Toronto. Maybe it's a system that keeps Kawhi in Toronto. I won a championship. I am the king of the North. We don't have that much competition in the East still. Why would I go to the West and make it harder for myself when I can now build something here? I can bring free agency to join me in Toronto. I can keep it going here the way it was in San Antonio. And Kawhi is just the type of guy to go out and try and do something like that. So he gets the MVP, his second MVP, joins that little group. Masai Ujiri, once again, he shows he's one of the better GMs in the league. He also, unfortunately, is being investigated for some pushing and hitting match with a sheriff after the game. My guess is the white sheriff didn't know who Masai Ujiri was, tried to keep him off the court from the celebration. Masai Ujiri, pushed back saying, who the fuck you think you are? I'm the GM. A little scuffle happened. And then you see it. Kyle Lowry ends up pulling him on the court and they start embracing. But it's under investigation now. There'll probably be some fine. It'll go away. Nothing's going to come of this. For Golden State, is the dynasty over? Is the window closed? We don't know. It seems like they have a lot of changes that could take place in this offseason. Definitely, Steph needs to look deep right now. Steph did not come up big when Clay went down. Steph did not come up, when KD went down. He did not come up big when Clay went down for the final 8 minutes of the game, and they were still in it, and they still had a chance to win that game and push for a Game 7. They did not have a team that was deep enough, that had enough heart the way Toronto's team did. KD tears the Achilles. Big story. Should he have played? They forced him to play. Look, it comes down to the player. KD didn't have to play. He wanted to play. He wanted to go out there and win that title. He heard how everybody was talking about him, how it was going to affect his legacy, the this, that's, and the what ifs. And unfortunately, you watch it. You see him turn his ankle, and at first you're like, oh, he turned his ankle, he calf with the ankle, it was weak, this, that. You watch it in slow motion, you see the Achilles actually pop, and the reason he turned his ankle is because that Achilles popped, and when he put his foot down, it just wasn't connected right. So you feel for him. More than likely, he misses all of next season now because of when this injury occurred. So do you offer him a max deal? Do you offer a Klay Thompson a max deal? Golden State, it's reported, is willing to offer both of them max contracts, even knowing they both could miss most or all of next season. Klay tears his ACL. Klay was balling in Game 5. Game 6. The way he's playing, if they go on and win Game 6, because more than likely they would have if he doesn't get hurt, he comes up in big games. He was on his way to becoming Finals MVP. Not Steph. Klay. With the performances he was putting up, you could even argue a little bit Draymond was on that path. But I think it hurts Klay more than it hurts KD because everybody's going to expect KD to come back and be KD and be able to score. You're coming back, you're Klay Thompson. You don't have that mystique that a Kevin Durant has. I think that ultimately hurts the number of suitors willing to come after him in free agency now. If he had 10, maybe it's now only 6 teams that are willing to take a chance, knowing that he's coming back, knowing that he won't play most or all of next season. There's going to be more teams willing to still push and put their name in the hat for a Kevin Durant. Does this ACL injury hurt Klay Thompson signing on to be in Space Jam 2? Does his recovery keep him from being part of that movie? And on the Space Jam 2, are these NBA players who have been in Men in Black commercials really just going to be the cast for that movie? The Chris Pauls and Anthony Davises and who's the other one that's in one of those commercials? Anyway, all those guys, are they also going to be in it? Now, Golden State, like I said, they're willing to offer both of these players max contracts, even knowing the situation. Which, hey, that's great, trying to keep the band together. And maybe that's both players' best option. Maybe if those players can get a single-year opt-out or opt-in, some kind of opt-in, opt-out clause for each year, and Golden State can just do them a solid, I mean, hey, that works out great for the players there. Fred VanVleet of the Raptors, he's going to get paid. This finals and playoff push worked out great for him as well. He's talking about it takes big balls to come up with big shots. Well, VanVleet did that. Looking like my boy's mini-me running around out there. Putting defense on Steph. Messing with him the whole series. Coming up with big shots. Out-shooting. Making it look like he's out-shooting Steph. Came up bigger than him in Game 6. And this is a guy in 2016, when he declares for the NBA draft after finishing up at Wichita State, goes undrafted. 2017, he leads the Raptors 905 team to the first Developmental League championship. Now he leads the Raptors to their first NBA championship. You could have made the argument that he was coming up as the MVP bigger than Kawhi was. With some of the shots, with the 12 points in the fourth quarter to help the Raptors close out Game 6. With the heart that he showed after getting busted in the face by Livingston and breaking his tooth off and getting his stitches in his face. Now, that may not be hard to a hockey player. That might just be something hockey players do. But for an NBA player, that showed a lot for his team. And he came back and he was strong and he was a leader on that court when he was out there. He was a nice piece coming off the bench anytime Lowry was not on the court. He kept up that aggressive play from the point guard position and made it be a position that had to be guarded. They couldn't continue to just try and double team Kawhi. They couldn't continue to try and take a shooter away in passing lanes. They had to honor that spot the whole time, and VanVleet balled out. Lowry came up big in Game 6. You could have argued he was the most valuable player over Kawhi because his performance in Game 6 led them to the title more than anything else, in my opinion. At least kept them from having to try and compete in a Game 7. Had the first 11 points of the game by himself. And he is not one we're used to seeing coming up in big moments, in big games. His reputation as the Raptors in the playoffs has been somebody who doesn't show. Now here it is, the biggest game, their second chance to win the title elimination-wise, and he showed up big. He showed up with heart. He did not get in foul trouble like he had in the previous game. And he got his first title. The Gasol brothers become the first brothers in the NBA to both win titles. Pau Gasol and Marc Gasol both have titles now, obviously different teams. It did look like Pau Gasol was on his way possibly to getting another title this year with Milwaukee. He gets injured. Milwaukee gets knocked out by Toronto, by his brother's team, Mark. This is a Raptors team that went from Coach of the Year, Dwayne Casey, to Nick Nurse that nobody knew of. Nick Nurse, you're now on the map. It's like Eric Spoelstra. The next year, it's going to be harder. Can you come back and do it again? And then the other fun fact from the NBA Finals, Patrick McCaw, three-peats. First 3 seasons in the NBA, title each year. First 2 years, he was with Golden State. This year, he was with Toronto. He three-peats. It ended up being a great finals. I had Toronto making it to the championship before the playoffs started. I thought Golden State would win the championship before the playoffs started. Before the NBA Finals started, I took the Raptors in 6. It was a great ending. The last 2 or 3 games of the series were by far the best basketball. These teams were going back and forth. Sure, it would have been great to see Klay healthy the whole time. It would have been great to see KD healthy the whole time. Would have been a different series. Maybe Golden State wins. Maybe Toronto wins. We don't know. All we can say is congratulations to the Toronto Raptors. You have won the NBA title. You are the best team right now. And hey, Kawhi, you get to go into next year with the idea that you are the best player in the NBA, maybe the best player on the planet. Great season. Can't wait for next year. With the Anthony Davis trade, the offseason has started. It's going to be fun times. It's going to be fun times. They're also having fun times right now in St. Louis, obviously, where their team came up big, the Blues against the Boston Bruins in Game 7. Just kind of dominated from horn to horn, winning the first NHL title for the Blues. Ryan O'Reilly had a huge series, came up big, former Avalanche player, so congratulations there for Ryan O'Reilly. Sportsnet put out 10 interesting facts, so I'm just going to read through some of those. As I've admitted, I'm not a big hockey person, so I'm not going to profess to be an expert in any way. It was a good series, hard fought, went to Game 7. Bruins gave everything they had. There was some big leads, some big comebacks. Game 7, ultimately, the Bruins didn't have enough. But here's Sportsnet, the 10 interesting facts they have around the Stanley Cup Finals. Now that the Blues have ended their wait, all eyes are on Toronto Maple Leafs to end their slump as not-so-proud owners of the league's longest active Stanley Cup drought at 52 years. Buffalo and Vancouver aren't far behind them at 48 years. So that's a nice list not to be on anymore. 2, not only had the Blues franchise never won a cup before this year, but no player on their roster had ever won a cup either. 3, it's been a long road to the Stanley Cup for the Blues this spring, 26 games to be exact. The Blues tied the 2014 Los Angeles Kings for most games played in a single postseason by Stanley Cup champ. 4, they had to get to the postseason in the first place. The road to the playoff contention was quite the journey. From last place in the entire NHL to start 2019 to sitting atop the league to close out the campaign. Quite a success story. Bennington's 16 playoff victories set a new record for most wins by a rookie netminder in a single postseason. 6, the Blues' victory follows an interesting trend of at least 11 teams to hoist the Stanley Cup. 4 had a midseason coaching change. The Blues, of course, replaced Mike Yeo with Craig Berube back in November of this season. The Pittsburgh Penguins twice won the Cup after a coaching change. The Kings won it with Darryl Sutter in 2011 and 2012. 7, Conn Smythe winner O'Reilly is the first player to score goals in 4 straight Stanley Cup final games since Wayne Gretzky did it in 1985. That is a great list to find yourself on right there. He finished the playoffs with the franchise best 8 goals and 15 assists for 23 points in 26 playoff games. Congratulations, Ryan O'Reilly. 8, home ice advantage. Not if you're hosting the Blues. They had 10 road wins in this finals, tying the record for that. 9, the Stanley Cup hasn't been won by a Canadian team since the Montreal Canadiens in 1993, but the Cup has visited its homeland plenty, and it'll make a number of trips north this summer. The Blues have a whopping 20 Canadian-born players on their roster, which is the most in the league this year. And 10, if Taylor Hall is the bringer of NHL draft lottery luck, it looks like journeyman Troy Brouwer might just be a good omen for teams winning the Cup. So apparently after he has played for a team, a few years later they've won the Cup. It's happened with the Blackhawks, the Capitals, and now the Blues. So congratulations to the St. Louis Blues. Congratulations to the Toronto Raptors. With those first-timers getting their wins, makes me hopeful that maybe the NFL will have a similar trend this year, and my Lions can get off the snide and win their first Super Bowl title in franchise history. Now, before that starts, we've still got the preseason, we've still got training camp and things like that to get to in the NFL season. I've decided this year on the show I'm going to go ahead and do my top 5 and bottom 5 teams by position group in the NFL. This week, I've decided to go ahead and start with the defensive line position. That's going to be your nose tackles, defensive tackles, and defensive ends. I am not counting edge rushers that are listed as linebackers. So for some of you out there who are going to get mad about how these rankings played out, mind you, some of these linebackers do a lot of the rushing, and they're not actually listed as defensive linemen. So defensive line group, I broke them down by division, okay? So I have each division, each team listed. I have the players for those teams listed out by position, nose tackle, defensive end, and key depth at the position. I gave each one of those categories, each team in that category, a ranking of 1 to 4. For each of the 3 categories, I totaled up their overall points, averaged their points, and then put them out of the 8 divisions, the teams in the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, based on where you came out ranked-wise after averaging out your 3 sections of defensive ends, defensive tackles, and key depth. So if we had 2 teams that averaged out to the same score, I then made a personal choice on, what defensive line I liked better, okay? So the teams after scoring rise, these are the clubs that ended up in my 4s, 3s, 2s, and 1s categories. So in the 1s, I have Kansas City, Buffalo, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, and Detroit. Those would be the top 8 defensive lines, not necessarily in that order, just the teams that came out as the 1s. The 2s would have been Minnesota, Carolina, Dallas, Seattle, Cleveland, Indianapolis, the Jets, and the Chargers. 3s, Chicago, New Orleans, Washington, the Rams, Cincinnati, Tennessee, New England, Denver. And the 4s, Green Bay, Atlanta, the New York Giants, Arizona, Baltimore, Houston, Miami, and Oakland. So those are how the different levels. First level, second level, third level, and fourth level of the defensive lines. So, top 5 defensive lines out of those 8. Actually, I'll just list my 1 through 32, and then we'll talk about top 5, bottom 5. So 1 through 32 in the final order. Buffalo, Philadelphia, Detroit, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Jacksonville, Pittsburgh, Kansas City, Minnesota, Dallas, the Chargers, Cleveland, Carolina, Indianapolis, Seattle, and the Jets would be the top half of the league, the top 16. Then the bottom half, Denver, New Orleans, Tennessee, Washington, Cincinnati, the Rams, New England, Chicago, Houston, Oakland, Atlanta, Arizona, Baltimore, Green Bay, Miami, and the Giants would be the bottom half. Now, as I say that, like I said in the intro, this is absolute ridiculous. I mean, there's no other way to put it. To have New Orleans as 18 on this list, knowing they have a pretty solid defensive line, is a little crazy. But in their division, they ranked out as the 3rd best defensive line in the division based on how I broke it down. So then they're falling in that 3rd tier, so they come in at 18. There's some in my top 5. There's some in my bottom 5 that seem to be dead hits. I mean, you start with the Buffalo Bills. I have them as the number 1 team, number 1 defensive line in football. And you look at who they're going to be rolling out. Players like Jordan Phillips, players like Star Lotulelei, Shaq Lawson, Jerry Hughes, Harrison Phillips, the rookie Ed Oliver, Trent Murphy. Best by far defensive line in the AFC East. They're solid. They're run stoppers. They're pass rushers from the inside and out. Having got extra guys like Ed Oliver who you can move inside and out. A Harrison Phillips taking over for Kyle Williams. The stuff Jordan Phillips can do, taking up blockers. Star Lotulelei in the run game. Solid defensive line. They have all the makings. And they ranked out in the AFC East as number 1 in each one of their categories. They're the only team that I ranked out that way. I really like that unit. I think they can build on that unit. They might need some more pass rushing depth, but you get that a little bit with the ability to move Ed Oliver around. Philadelphia, once again, they have a solid defensive line, a defensive line that really is to be feared, commended. I mean, wow. Fletcher Cox, Tim Jergen, Derek Barnett, Vinnie Curry, Brandon Graham. You add Josh Sweet. You add Malik Jackson. You have Hassan Ridgeway coming in. The only category they didn't win in the NFC East, I didn't have them as my favorite defensive ends. I had DeMarcus Lawrence and Robert Quinn because they're more pure defensive ends. They're more the pass rusher type that you like to see. And I think they're going to be a good duo for Dallas this year. I did have Dallas as the second best defensive line in the NFC East. But Philadelphia is going to bring it. That front line is going to be the catalyst to their defense. It's going to be something else to watch. They're definitely going to be a contender again because of it. And then my third team. Yes, I'm a fan of this team. Yes, they are my favorite team. But if you really look at what the NFC North has to offer, okay, you could say Minnesota is a better defensive line. I had them really close. After the average, I had Minnesota at a 1.6 and Detroit at a 1.3. But you look at what Detroit's been building, okay? Damon Harrison, yes, he's asking for a new deal. He's got 2 years left. They're going to figure it out. He's going to be out on the field. They bring in Trey Flowers. Romeo Okwara had a good season for them. He's going to have a better season for them in year 2. A'Shawn Robinson, Deshaun Hand, we saw what he did as a rookie last year. I think that Austin Bryant and PJ Johnson as rookies this year are going to be key depth and make as much of an impact as Deshaun Hand last year. Young, fast, quick, aggressive, stout. You've got leaders on that team. You've got Damon Harrison knowing how to hold it down. Best defensive line Detroit's had in a while since Sue's early years in Detroit when Detroit's defense was really getting it done. The San Francisco 49ers. In the NFC West, Sheldon Day, Cedric Thornton, Arik Armstead, DeForest Buckner, you got DJ Jones, Solomon Thomas. We'll see. You're adding Nick Bosa to the group. So they had a solid defensive line last year. Not great, but pass rushers all over the place. Guys that can play inside and out, and Buckner, Armstead. Bosa will probably use that way. We'll see what happens with Solomon Thomas. Maybe he needs to move more inside. I averaged them out as a 1.3 in their division. I have them with the second best defensive tackle group, the best depth, and the best defensive ends in the division. Seattle's fallen off. The Rams, hey, face it, their best player on the defensive line is and forever will be Aaron Donald. Michael Brocker's second to that. They don't have anybody really listed at defensive end that's worth it, and their depth is suspect. Most of their top players that are pass rushers right now sit at the linebacker position. So again, as I go through my list, I got to remind myself and you guys that these are just players listed as defensive linemen. And then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sitting in the NFC South. I graded them out as a 2. They had second would have been Carolina at a 2.3 right behind them. Carolina is really impressive. I could have argued either way for either team. But you put Vita Vea with an Ndamukong Suh. You have Noah Spence, who's kind of a do-it-all type guy inside out. William Golston, Jeremiah Ledbetter, Bo Allen. We'll see if Jason Pierre-Paul can play this year. It doesn't sound like he's going to, but then you also have a Carl Nassib, who's just a tough son of a gun. Really solid defensive line. I think they're going to fly around, and I think they're going to be hard to run the ball on. Carolina, again, I mean, you really could have argued easily Carolina, Kawan Short, adding Gerald McCoy, Bruce Irvin, Mario Addison, Dontari Poe, Kyle Love, Vernon Butler, Brian Burns. I honestly could have argued Carolina over Tampa Bay. Carolina's got better depth, in my opinion. Tampa Bay's got the better defensive ends. And honestly, I gave them better defensive tackles as well, as I always thought Sue was a little better than McCoy, and Kawan Short and Vita Vea's kind of a push. So real close there. But those are the top 5 that I have. And I know it's ridiculous. I know it's before these rosters are set. We could still have trades. We could still have players who get cut that sign with other teams. But as where we're sitting right now, the defensive lines I like the most in the NFL. My top 5 in order are Buffalo, Philadelphia, Detroit, San Francisco, and Tampa Bay. Now that leaves us with the bottom 5, where we have Arizona, Baltimore, Green Bay, Miami, and the Giants. Arizona, you would think, would be higher, but again, their pass rushers are listed as linebackers. Baltimore, their defensive line has been decimated. Green Bay's got a younger defensive line, a couple pieces in guys like Mike Daniels. Miami's and the Giants' defensive lines, I don't know that they would really hold up, or all of them could start for a major college program. I'm not going to break down all of their players because it's just kind of sad. Those teams, I think, are pretty much a hit, and each one of those might hurt Baltimore fans' feelings that they came in at 29 on my list, but they're ravaged right now at that position. With the retirings and free agents that have left and players that have, not re-signed, Baltimore's hurt right now. And it used to be a position of strength, and right now it's not. So we'll see what they're able to do. If they have guys that are able to step up and really prove me wrong, that's fine. I have no problem being wrong. These are predictions, and just like anybody's else predictions, they're not worth much. What is worth much is what a good team, a good owner, a good player can mean to a community. And this week, the Denver Broncos country, the Denver community lost a great one in Pat Bowlen as he passes away at 75 from his battle with Alzheimer's. I didn't always see eye to eye with Bowlen. There was times I thought he was doing stuff to possibly put himself in a position to move the Broncos, to leverage the Broncos against the city. I've grown to respect everything he's done for the game, to understand the 15 committees that he was on, what he meant to the TV contracts and the revenue, and all the things that he's done for the NFL. The Broncos team will remain in the Bowlen Trust for now. I would expect that to actually probably wrap itself up sooner than later. Now that Pat has passed, now that Mr. B is gone, I would expect that trust not to be in place for too much longer, as they will, I'm sure, try and get that figured out as soon as possible. He is going into the Hall of Fame this year, far too late. It's unfortunate he was not alive for this moment. And that his Alzheimer's had taken over too much for him to really even know what was going on at the time. Pat Bowlen made his money in oil, gas, and real estate. He bought the Broncos for $71 million, and they are now valued at $2.6 billion. That just goes to show, when you invested something, if you put the money, you put the time, you put the love, you put the respect into it that it deserves, that you can grow it out to something amazing. Over 300 wins in 30 years, 7 Super Bowl appearances under Pat Bowlen. Denver's 354, 240-1 since he bought the club in 1984. They have less losing seasons than they have Super Bowl appearances. Only the San Antonio Spurs, New England Patriots, and Los Angeles Lakers have a better winning percentage during that time span, during his ownership, than the Broncos' .596 winning percentage. Bowlen served as a sounding board for NFL commissioners Pete Rozelle, Paul Tagliabue, and Roger Goodell. He was critical with other owners. Even Jerry Jones, latched on to Pat Bowlen when he entered the league and kind of learned from him and, made his way after that. He's crucial to the league's growth as a member of the 15 NFL committees, including co-chairing the NFL Management Council and working on the TV network contracts and the NFL Network, and the league's groundbreaking $18 billion deal in 1998, all very underneath Pat Bowlen's watch. Mrs. Ford, the owner, I want to end on this. Mrs. Ford, the owner of the Detroit Lions, put out a statement, as many people did this week. But being a Lions fan, seeing his far-reaching influence on the game and what people thought about him, I thought Mrs. Ford's comments I'd like to share on my show. So Pat Bowlen, 1944 to 2019. Pat Bowlen's contributions to our great game will forever be cherished in the history of the National Football League. His leadership over the years, including serving as chairman of both the NFL Broadcasting and NFL Management Council executive committees, in addition to the unwavering commitment to his community, are testaments to his high character. The NFL will celebrate his life when he is enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame this summer. On behalf of my family and the Detroit Lions, we extend our heartfelt sympathies to his wife, Annabelle, the Bowlen family, and the entire Broncos organization. Statement from Mrs. Ford. That's as real as it gets. That's what we do here on this show. We talk about sports. We try and keep it real. Until next time, I ask all of you, just be real.